You are tuning in to the Pop Culture Retrospective Podcast.
This show is dedicated to the memory of my big sister Rebecca, a fan of all things pop culture, particularly of the people, places, and things that defined the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Welcome aboard this pop culture time machine. I'm Amy Lewis. This is episode number 98, a conversation about Tori Amos and how pop culture can help with healing, with some assistance from Dr. Adrienne Trier-Bieniek, who is a professor of sociology and also hosts a pop culture podcast called Most Popular. When the two of us got connected and I learned that she has done extensive research on pop culture, singer-songwriters, and teaches sociology, I knew that she would be an excellent fit for the show. I knew that she appreciated a deep dive into pop culture, which, if you've been a listener of the show for any length of time, you'll know that I do too. Further, when I learned that she did a study about the impact of singer-songwriter Tori Amos on her fans and, the power of music in general, I knew we would have a lot to talk about, as my sister, the inspiration for the show, was a huge Tori Amos fan. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this enlightening conversation with Dr. Adrienne Trier-Bieniek. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Pop Culture Retrospective Podcast. My name is Amy Lewis, and I'm, as always, the captain aboard this pop culture time machine, as I like to say in my opening. Today, I'm very fortunate to be welcomed by a special guest and fellow podcaster named Dr. Adrienne Trier-Bieniek. Pronouncing that correctly, I practiced a few times. She is a gender and media scholar who has published books on gender and pop culture, Beyonce's influence in music, Tori Amos's fandom, as well as publications focused on the ways pop culture can help heal from trauma, which if anybody's been listening to the show for any length of time, you'll know that this show came out of a tough situation. She hosts Most Popular, a podcast about the impact pop culture has on society. Dr. Adrienne has been featured in publications like the New York Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, and NBC News. I am not familiar with any of those. That's where are those from? That is incredibly impressive list of where you've been publicized. And she is also a fellow native Midwesterner hailing from the Mitten State of Michigan. I went to Northern Michigan University in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So our vowels may come out odd as we go through the show. We'll see what happens. We'll see whose accent has gone away the most. So, Adrienne, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for that introduction. That was amazing.
Well, thank you. You have a very impressive resume, and I think you're certainly a welcome guest to the show because what you've done with your career and what you've researched really aligns with what I do with the show. And coincidentally, one of your books discusses a singer-songwriter who my sister was a huge fan of, and I learned a ton. So I'm really excited to chat with you today.
I'm really excited to chat with you too. Also, I'll be in the UP next week. So
ooh, nice.
I know.
What will you be doing up there?
Just getting out. I'm in Florida now, so just getting out of the heat and
yes.
Going to like Pictured Rocks and going up. Yeah. And getting in the lake as much as I can and,
cool.
Not being in 100-degree humidity heat.
Yes. Yeah, true. Yeah. The Upper Peninsula is definitely a great summer weather. And I did a solo backpacking trip in Pictured Rocks back when 20 years ago. So nice. It's good to know that. It's a good place to go. Highly recommend. It's a lot like I live in Maine, so it's kind of a lot like Maine. So
yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Well, my first question before we get into the books that I like to ask people is, when did you know that writing and pop culture and research were going to play an important role in your life?
I don't know about the research part, but I was writing about pop culture when I was in elementary school. So I would try and write my own stories, and I would use the songs that were popular at the time and that I liked. When I was a kid, I was really into Paula Abdul.
Oh,
So
she's very talented.
yes, and when you're 9 years old and you're in dance classes and a video comes on that's part cartoon, part dance. I mean that
Hmm.
was it for me. So I would write stories from those songs. And I
Wow.
would create characters and I would infuse the songs into the story somehow. And I would literally write like, and now we're going to stop the story and listen to Paula Abdul. Like I was
Oh my
very
God.
clearly like, you must stop now reading, go listen to the song and then come back.
Wow.
So,
We definitely would have been friends in elementary school because I would have been all over that. I would have
oh,
wanted
that
to
would
hear
have been
that story.
amazing because people really thought I was weird for how much I loved her. So that
Yes.
would have been wonderful. The research part of it came when I was in grad school and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to study. 'Cause basically, once you get into a doctoral program, whatever you choose to study is going to be what you study for quite a long period of time after. And
Yeah.
I really knew that there was something cool about Tori Amos's fan base. And I had been, before I'd gone to grad school, I worked at a women's center on a college campus. And one of my jobs there, I was the volunteer coordinator, but one of my jobs was to um, help anybody who came in who had been sexually assaulted or
Mm.
had dealt with any sort of abuse. I was like a first contact person where they would come to me and then I would help them get whatever resources they need or take them to counseling on campus or whatever they needed. So I'd had this background in helping people deal with trauma. And so I knew that I wanted to understand how music helped women, especially, deal with
Mm.
trauma. And being a massive fan of hers, just sort of like it all kind of fell into place that
Yeah.
this would be what I want to look at.
Wow. That is very profound. And one thing to just go back to Paula Abdul just for one quick second, then we'll take a deep dive here into Tori Amos, which I'm very excited
We
about.
can talk about Paula Abdul all day. It's great.
Okay. So on part two of this episode, so there's a famous line in Opposites Attract where Paula Abdul says, "I don't like cigarettes," and Scat Cat says, "But I like to smoke." How did you work that into your story for children?
I don't know. I don't remember, but I suspect I would have been, knowing me, I was very self-righteous at that age. So I would have been like, haha, Paula Abdul doesn't like cigarettes.
Yep.
Like I would have taken that and ran with it.
Yep. Yep. It'll impact her ability to dance. So
Yeah.
it's good that she was anti-smoking, especially, in the 80s too, when that wasn't necessarily the way to go.
Yeah.
But yes, so back to Tori Amos. So you realized how impactful music was, especially on women. Did you notice that while you were working at that job, sort of helping women who were unfortunately
Yeah.
the victims of assault?
I think sort of mostly I figured it out just by going to concerts and meeting folks, and like in the late 90s chat rooms were just becoming a thing, and there was a lot of people posting in chat rooms about how they interpreted her music, what their own personal experiences were. There was a lot of that conversation happening, and this was like pre-Reddit, pre-anything, so it was
Yeah.
all kind of more organic than it is now. There wasn't a lot of trolling. There wasn't a lot of people going in and saying, let me tell you why you're wrong. I mean, there's people who
Yeah.
argued, but it wasn't the same level that you have now.
Right.
And I remember when I started my dissertation, so this was like 2008, I found the chat rooms from 10 years ago that someone had archived online, and I printed out hundreds of pages of it to go through and kind of try and analyze what people had said.
Wow.
And it was a totally different experience of just a lot of honesty, a lot of conversation. I don't think people had grasped anonymity yet at that point because they probably overshared.
Yeah. Right.
But that community and being a part of it for a decade or so before I even started a dissertation on it really made me see that there was more to this music than what was already out there. And it's still kind of true. At that point, there was not a lot of study on women who are fans of other women in pop music.
Yeah.
If there was, it was probably like Madonna.
True. Yep.
But there wasn't a ton out there on why women and girls like another female musician.
Yeah.
There was a ton on like why they liked the Beatles, why they liked like, now it'd be like, I don't know, like the Jonas Brothers or I forget what Harry Styles was a part of the group.
One Direction, I think.
Yeah, One Direction.
Yeah.
Or like K-pop. Like it was more of a focus on that kind of stuff, but not a lot on women who appreciated other women's music and who were getting something out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I know one thing you talked a lot about is how women who are fans are often portrayed as this crazy, going, sweating, crying, screaming. I know growing up, being a fan of Michael Jackson and his concerts being on TV, they always pan to the girls who were about ready to, pass out because he was on stage. So I can certainly appreciate you trying to broaden that, description of women who are fans, and especially of women who are performers as well.
Yeah.
And how did you at first want to do your project on just sort of music's impact in general, or how did you narrow it down to specifically for focusing on Tori Amos?
I don't think I ever thought I would do anything other than that. I don't think it ever occurred to me that one of the things you do when you write something like that is you do want to make it as specific as possible. Mm-hmm. And so once I sort of settled on, I want to understand music, it was very easy for me to make that leap. I also took a class one summer, because sometimes you end up taking classes in the summer in grad school. And it was a holistic healing class, which was totally outside of my grasp. Like I just took it because I needed a credit and it looked interesting. And sometimes that works out very well. And in this case, it worked out really well because it was me and a bunch of social workers. And the most compassionate group of people is if you want to feel just unconditional love, get into a class with a bunch of people who are just starting to study social work, because it was the most supportive group of people. And so I tentatively said, hey guys, I kind of like this idea. What do you think? And they just wrapped me in like you must do this, like sisterhood of a hug. Like, yes, this is important. You should do this work. And that was enough to set me down that path of, just a little bit of support from total strangers who I have no idea where any of them ended up, but just enough from them to say, this is a good idea. You should pursue it, was what set me down that way.
Nice. Oh, that's so great. And I can certainly attest to that experience as well, having gone through a school counseling graduate program. So you're right. And I have some bias as well towards counselors and social workers. Did you meet, was your proposal, however you want to phrase it, was that met with any sort of people questioning it? Like how are you going to be able to turn that into something very extensive?
Yeah, pretty much at every turn. The work that I do, there's a scholar who I really like, and I've talked to him a few times about just how do we, there's a lot of misconceptions about pop culture and studying pop culture and thinking that it's kind of fluffy and safe and easy. And one of the things I think that people don't understand is that pop culture influences us whether we like it or not, right? So like I give this example in my classes a lot. I have never seen a show with any of the Kardashian people in it at all. I've never sat and watched one. I can name probably 4 out of the 7. I think there's 7 siblings or 6 siblings or whatever. I can solidly name 4 of them. Yeah. Having never seen anything, right? Yep. That I know that Kim Kardashian has an underwear or undergarment line or something. Yeah. I've never purchased any of it. It shows up in my socials feed constantly, right? Mm-hmm. So it influences us whether we like it or not. And that was one of the hardest sells that I had when I first started proposing to do this work, was that there's a whole like genre of sociology that looks at culture and how people create culture and appropriate it. And that seemed fine to a lot of people, but this notion that pop culture is worthy of a dissertation definitely took me some effort to convince folks, and still does. I mean, to this day, when I say like I've done books on Beyonce, I'm working on one right now on Taylor Swift, you get a mixed bag of, oh, that's nice. Or let me tell you how that person's music has influenced me. It happened
Yeah.
at the doctor the other day. She asked me what I was working on. And I said, I'm working on a book on Taylor Swift. And she was like, let me tell you about this song I heard.
Yes. Yes. Let
So
me tell you about my nieces who flew to
yes,
Paris and got to see her perform with her parents as a Christmas present. That was
exactly. That's amazing.
very,
Yes.
very impactful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was definite, and it still is met with a bit of, I don't know, consternation maybe. But it is what it is. I mean, if I
Yeah.
were studying something that was very clear, like if I was looking at, I don't know, crime or criminal behavior, even that would be met with, why are you a sociologist doing this? It's work for police or something. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's awesome that you, despite sort of the people questioning it, that you decided to go with it, because I'm sure this must be a very unique study that
mhm.
hasn't been, replicated. There's been, a lot of research done on very similar topics for years and years and years, and for you to kind of branch out and do something on her is pretty incredible and impressive. And who knew? I mean, the all the information that you collected was really, really fascinating. But can you take us back for a second and just explain kind of how you became such a big Tori Amos fan, so much so that you wanted to research her and her impact?
Oh, sure. So it was 1997 and I was 17, and I had just gotten out of a relationship that was fairly unhealthy. And my friend, who I'm going to tell you his real name because his real name is unbelievable. His name is Random. He had at the time, VH1 was putting out CDs of live performances called Crossroads, where people would kind of sing with another person, or they would do it unplugged and they would put it out on a CD, and then you could like buy it and listen to it. And so he had a Crossroads CD where she covered Bruce Springsteen's I'm on Fire.
Mm-hmm.
Which, as a side note, listening to it now, hugely problematic lyrics because he's singing to what is considered a little girl, but we'll put that on a shelf for now. And I just went, what is this? And I took it from him. And I'm sure Random doesn't remember this, but I took it from him and said, this is now mine, and I'm going to have this.
Yeah.
And I went to another friend who was, I grew up in a really, really small town in northern Michigan. There's like 92 people in my class when we graduated. So
Wow.
The music situation in our town was one record store that opened in like 96, and the guy only stayed in business for I think 3 years because there was no need for it.
Yeah.
So I found one person who I knew understood music that wasn't on the radio, like underground stuff, which she would have been considered underground in my neighborhood, which is nuts.
Yeah.
And she said, go get Little Earthquakes, and then go get Under the Pink and Boys for Pele and listen to them in that order. So I just took that as like, yep, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I took my money that I earned from working summertime at gift shops, and I bought all 3 CDs, and that was it. I was absolutely hooked.
Yeah.
And that was, almost 30 years ago. And I still, when she puts new music out, I still am right there. Now you order it online, but
Right.
I'm still right there getting it.
Yeah. Yeah. What a time for that, to listen to music, and there was no other distractions. I imagine you probably were uninterrupted, just sitting, taking it all in, and were, I'm sure, blown away, as so many millions and millions of people have been.
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't, other than reading the insert in the CD, that was how you figured out the lyrics, right?
Yeah.
So normally I would just sit and hold that and read the lyrics while the song was being played. And now I think they put lyrics on like iTunes and stuff when an album is released, but you're so tempted to flip over and look at your email or socials or something else. Like it's not the same
Very
experience, just kind of a tunnel vision of it.
Yeah. And what was it about her music that really spoke to you?
It was so honest. It wasn't talking about love. Not that songs about love are bad, because clearly I'm working on a book on Taylor Swift. But it wasn't the heavy, like, girl must meet boy and then her life is complete stuff.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
It was more in depth, and she was covering and talking about topics like religion, what it means to be a woman. She talked about death. Like there were these things that had nothing to do with relationships. And that was very appealing to me because I remember being very, very young and saying to my mom that I get sick of all the songs on the radio talking about love.
Mm-hmm.
And her just being like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's
yeah,
true though. I've had that thought a lot my whole life is like, why is every song, how can somebody has like an album of 15 songs and they're all about relationships and, and they've had like 4 albums. Like, how can you have a catalog of 100 songs that are all sort of hitting on the same thing? Like, could you think of anything else to write a song about? So,
yeah,
and that's pretty progressive that she was, in the 90s. I'm trying to remember how old she is now, but that she was writing, more advanced, um, deeper lyrics than probably other musicians around her, her age
yeah.
category at that time.
Yeah, she was writing about her own experiences and her own thoughts. And sometimes relationships played in and sometimes they didn't. And I think that's a more accurate projection of what life is. Like if you have a relationship, great, but it's not 100% of your identity. And that
Right.
was a great message for somebody my age to be getting.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, yeah, that's true. Especially if you having gone through a breakup, is being reminded that, that doesn't have to define you. That's definitely a great message. And it sounds like she had sort of and again, this is all information that I am aware of because of your writing, not because I, looked up some stuff, that she had sort of like a kind of unconventional kind of education, I think, around music too. She was in like kind
Oh,
of an
yeah.
advanced program as a child, but was kind of doing things differently. Is that correct?
Yeah, she was accepted into the Peabody Institute, which was in Maryland. I think it was outside of Baltimore. I don't remember at this point. And she talks a lot about how she never learned how to play music, like read it. She would just do it by ear. And I guess that was unacceptable for them, that they wanted you to be reading it. And
Yeah.
she also talks about how she wanted to play covers of Led Zeppelin more than she wanted to play covers of Mozart,
Yeah.
which
That's awesome.
is awesome.
Yeah. When somebody's like already cool and they're like 8 years old, I mean,
Yeah.
she's probably cooler than I am as
Yeah.
a 41-year-old. She was cooler when she was like 7. So
Yeah.
that's pretty
Yeah. Well,
telling.
and she writes about, and she talks about how she when she was 13, she was kicked out of Peabody and her father was a preacher. And so he was like, well, we have to keep you practicing, getting experience. So
Yeah.
he would escort her to gay bars around DC. And this was in the 70s. I mean, so this was
Unbelievable.
yeah. So she would play night after night in these bars and with her father in his clerical collar hanging out with her. But like,
Yeah.
how amazing of a progressive parent is
That
that he
is.
was like, you'll be safe here.
Mhm.
And I'm going to escort you. And these people are going to be accepting of you. Like that.
Right.
So cool that a
Yes.
parent think that.
I know. Again, I will never be as cool as that dad. I've got 2 kids, and I mean, I can't even think of anything that creative to do. That is amazing. And she probably and maybe in some ways got a better education sort of doing it that way too, having an audience with unique tastes and and her style, not that I'm not comparing them, but I kind of liken her piano playing as somebody who is not trained in music at all, but just my own whatever. No credentials to say this, but sort of like Ani DeFranco, just in the sense of like, just playing the piano in a way that you've never heard it played before. And Ani DeFranco playing guitar in a way that I, never heard before. It's hard to not be intrigued by her music, even if you're not, even if you like, different style of music, like heavy metal or something. I think it's hard to not be intrigued by her unique style because it's really one in a million.
Yeah, it really is. She and Ani DeFranco are mentioned a lot in the same sentence, same research I've read. A lot of people talk about them together because they kind of came up at the same time.
Yeah.
They kind of had the whole unique, like they were unique in terms of what they were doing. Ani DeFranco created her own record label and was just like, I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I see there's a very distinct line between the two of them.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely breaking down some barriers, especially at that time. because I know you touched on some other sort of singer-songwriters that became popular around that time. And how do you think somebody like Tori Amos, who got, pretty well known in the mid to late 90s, compares to somebody like Alanis Morissette, who exploded at that time? How do you think they sort of compare and contrast?
So they toured together in 99
Oh, wow.
and
Huh.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Wow.
my cousin actually got me tickets for it. It was amazing.
God, I bet.
It was fantastic. I think they both played like 12 or 14 songs. And it was such a cool experience. I think
Yeah.
Alanis is a good example of someone who knows, like, I would not be here without this person
Hmm.
who kind of blazed the trail first. But I think the cool thing about Alanis Morissette and Tori Amos is that they existed in the same point of time. I think if they were playing, and Ani DeFranco too, I think if they were at the height of what they were in the mid 90s, if that had happened now, it would be a constant conversation of who's better, who's prettier,
Yes.
who's more talented. Oh, this person said this, she threw shade at her.
Yep.
There would have been more of that. And I think the mid 90s was an odd sweet spot for women who were doing these types of confessional songs
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
I think now, I mean, we see it now with Taylor Swift and Beyonce all the time. Like, these two women are constantly pitted against each other, even though for all intents and purposes, whenever you see either one of them talk about the other, they have nothing but lovely things to say.
Right.
There's this contrived environment. And it's nice that there was that moment in history where those people could all exist together.
Yeah.
There's not a lot I miss about like non-tech life, but I do kind of miss that, where if you're a musician and an artist, you could coexist.
Yes.
And it wouldn't be up on, Instagram the next day of who looks better than who. You know what I mean?
Right.
Kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. The headline, I don't know why I find for like 25 years, I don't know why I do this, is I'm always going on like people.com. Don't know
Yeah.
why. I don't even know who a lot of current, like, really celebrities that are like a big deal right now. I honestly have really no clue who they are, but it is amazing what is the top headline is Taylor Swift bought this dress and you can buy it too. It's like, that's really like the biggest
That's the news.
celebrity
Yeah.
news, right? Like, didn't John Bon Jovi just like serve a bunch of people who don't have, the means to
Right.
buy food? And he just, like, why is this the top news? And I think that, like you mentioned, I think the 90s was a great time because people bought physical music, people went to the movies. I think there was just a more interest in, getting a hold of that physical media
Yeah.
of other, of musicians that you liked, and going to their concert, because you couldn't stream it on TV or whatever. So it's nice that they recognize that, it's about, I say this a lot, but it's like a community over competition. And that must have been an incredible show. Oh my God, I can't even imagine. It's like every 90s kid's dream. That's pretty amazing.
There's a YouTube of the whole concert. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I'm sure you can see the whole thing.
Okay.
Beginning to end. It was
Yep.
amazing.
Yeah.
Was amazing.
Okay. No, well, that's all I'll be doing this weekend. We have a smart TV, or whatever. I always say like, oh, I think we have a stupid TV, but I'll have some popcorn after watch that. So that sounds awesome. So what did to go back to your book, which I do have with me now, I might cite some passages from it. Can you tell us a little bit about a lot of Post-its? Can you tell us a little bit about what went into your research? You kind of started to touch on it a little bit earlier, but how did your research for this work?
So I interviewed 42 women who were fans of Tori Amos, or people who identify as women. And I found them beginning, it's what's called a snowball sample. So I found 2 people and they let me know about somebody else. And then that person let me know about someone else. I posted a few things on social media at the time. I think I don't remember if I used Facebook or not. I know I used like community. There was still like community forums that I could post in. And then I got lucky that one of the women I interviewed ran a nonprofit that had a whole kind of gaggle of folks that wanted to talk to me. So I sat down, I interviewed them, I asked them questions about her music and what it means to them, and sort of took it from there. The themes that I found were, to me, didn't seem surprising, but I guess for studies of women in music, it was a bit of a more of a contribution than I thought it was going to be, because they were talking a lot about their experiences with like domestic violence, sexual assault. A lot of people talked about how her music got them through a really bad divorce, or not just bad breakups, but like really terrible relationships that ended badly, like really badly. And then also divorce of parents. Like people talked about when their parents got divorced, that this was the music they listened to. And these are, really traumatic events that I don't know that people have attached, at least not with women who do music. There hasn't been a lot of conversation at the time. There hadn't been a lot of conversation of that.
Yeah.
They told me about the connection to the birth of their children, and the relationships they had with their fathers was a big one. And on the one hand, I'm really lucky that people opened up to me, and I mean, a total stranger. I did these things over the phone. This is before there was video, right? So like, I never even saw me. I just did these things over the phone. It was great that they opened up to a total stranger. And the other side of it was like, I almost always felt like there's so many of these stories that need to be told, and research historically has not been great at positioning women's experiences at the forefront of conversations, or non-binary people, or queer people, or, the list can go on and on.
Yeah.
So the fact that these 42 people who had never met me before were willing to share some of the most intimate experiences of their lives for this research that they didn't know that if anyone was ever going to read it, told me a lot about what research is missing in terms of the experiences of people beyond what we're used to seeing in data. And good research should take whatever you're studying and apply it to like help people in some way. And if you're not looking at a whole population of people, you're not able to do that second part. Like, you're not able to find a way to help people in some way.
Yeah. Well, I think that definitely came across in your books, and there's a couple of just points that I came across that really just kind of hit me. So, my sister, without getting into too much stuff, my sister struggled a lot with mental health and some other kind of medical related issues, and so I was just very struck by what you were able to discover and the connection that people have with her, with Tori Amos. And so one thing that you wrote about that we're kind of talking about here is, you said, moving beyond general uses of music to heal brings me to many of the most compelling and impactful results of my research. The most common experience that women were using Tori's music to heal from was sexual or domestic violence. This was followed by eating disorders, dysfunctional relationships with their fathers, and experiences miscarrying or having difficulty sustaining a pregnancy. All of these are common themes with Tori's music, which I had no idea. So it is not surprising that these women would seek out her music as a means to help them heal. That's, I mean, wow, blown away. I again was just oblivious to all of this, and it sounds like a lot of, not all of them, but some of her fans would often try to kind of meet with her and talk with her, and it sounds like she's pretty receptive to those interactions.
Yeah, especially in the 90s and up until about 2010, 2011, she would fairly regularly hold meet and greets before every show, and not just like a 5-10 minute her behind a table. I went to one in Milwaukee, and it was an hour and a half that people stood and she talked to people. I mean, it was a long period of time that she would stand outside a venue and meet with people and hear their stories and their experiences and write down on her hand songs that they were requesting. And that's a lot. Part of the outcome of this for her, if anyone isn't familiar, is the organization RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. So she helped found that because of these people coming up to her. before shows and telling her about their lives. And, you know, a lot of artists do stuff like that, but it's fairly, I think it's pretty awesome that she was like, I'm not enough. I need to find a way to help these people.
Yeah.
And not a lot of artists are willing to stand outside and talk to people for an hour, you know, before a show.
Yeah.
And it was pretty amazing. I think she stopped doing it around COVID, which most people did. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know that she's done them regularly since. And also by the time COVID happened, she was in her 60s. So
God, she's in her 60s, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
So, you know, maybe she's just not really, I mean, your back starts to hurt at some point. You don't want to stand up outside.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
all day.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like Tori Amos also was a victim of sexual assault, which you wrote about as well. And so it sounds like she has kind of, people have connected with her over that because she sings, you know, writes about it and things like that. So she has a really kind of deep connection with people who have been impacted by that unfortunate scenario. Yeah, but that's amazing that she started an organization too. I mean, it's certainly a tough topic. You know, it's maybe would be much easier to start the like Tori Amos scholarship, which would be wonderful. Of course, you know, but to do something on that level to, you know, help people who have been through such horrific circumstances is pretty profound to say the least. Was there anything that stood out to you while you were doing your research? Something that struck you that you weren't expecting? A story that really moved you, or anything that stood out?
I don't know that there was anything that I wasn't expecting, because by the time you start talking to people, you're fairly certain of where things are going to go.
Yeah.
I was always surprised at how honest people were with me. And you know, if you're willing to participate in something like this, you probably already have a degree of being able to share your experience without a lot of prompting. But it never really took me much to get people to have a conversation about what their experiences were, what they had been through, whatever trauma they connected her music to.
Yeah.
And you know, it was like a privilege that they would be willing to share with a stranger over the phone these things that had happened to them in their lives. There was one woman who was very honest with me about being sexually assaulted, and then after we hung up, she painted a picture of Tori Amos for me and mailed it to me.
Oh wow.
And and I have it in my office at school.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty cool that she was so willing to share these experiences and then share her art with me. That was awesome. That was amazing.
Yeah. What a great gift. That's fantastic. Oh, nice. That's so great. Well, it sounds like it's just a great community of people, and you probably passed the Tori Amos fan test or whatever. So maybe that just allowed.
They do test. Yeah, they did test me.
I bet.
Yeah.
And I just love how just the overall theme too in your book, talking about just the healing power of music, you know, whether it's, you know, Tori Amos or otherwise. And there's one other thing I wanted to. So you were referencing a study about music having an impact on HIV positive women who are undergoing treatment for mental health, and the authors of the study noted that listening to music increased each woman's ability to communicate her emotions depending on the genre of music. And this part I just loved is, for example, because most of the women in the study identified as Latina, they had grown up around salsa music. Many of the women expressed that listening to salsa music represented a feeling of survival, specifically survival from abuse, which many of them admitted to having experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I feel like I kind of pictured that scenario just playing in my head of these women finding comfort through that music. Was pretty profound feeling.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the reasons why when people talk about just tragedies happening in, you know, one of the things that's taken away from folks is their culture. And usually that means whatever music is most comfortable for them, right?
Yeah.
It's also when you hear, I forget what the study is. So I can't be entirely certain, but there are studies that talk about, like, when you're in prison, prisoners who have abilities to listen to music in one way or another, it instantly calms their blood pressure down. It's why when you go to doctor's offices and you're going to have a procedure, a lot of times they'll ask you, like, what would you like to listen to while you're in this MRI tube or whatever? What will take your mind off of what's going on?
Yeah.
And it's because music has that ability, right? It has the ability to make your mind relax or take you to another place or make you think about something that takes you out of the moment that you're in.
Yeah.
And it's really impactful.
Yeah, definitely. And that was definitely quite apparent in your book and other writings as well. So one other person I kind of want to make sure to touch on too, because you've written on her pretty extensively, is Beyonce, the Queen Bee, who is immensely talented. She's just one of those people that just is like, I don't know how you can put more talent into one person. How do you think, or do you think that fans are drawn to people like Tori Amos and Beyonce for similar reasons?
100%.
Hmm.
I've never done as in-depth study of Beyonce fans as I did on Tori Amos, so I can't say for certain. But the stuff I've read, Beyonce has become not so much a person anymore as just like a iconic, like, lighthouse.
Yeah.
For folks.
Yep.
And I think she's a little more private because of that. Like, we don't see her in the same level of exposure as other celebrity, because I think that she needs to, like, have her own time.
Yeah.
But Beyonce does her homework. I mean, Cowboy Carter, which just came out a couple months ago, there's been a lot of conversation about, doing country music or whatever, but
Yeah.
listening to her albums, she does her homework, and they are so layered with history, with stuff that you would never have thought that a pop singer would take and place in a song and make it so that you now need to educate yourself on what that is.
Yeah.
I mean, her music is almost always a study. It's like taking an African American studies class, and you can dissect every album, and that would be like a 101 African American studies experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I really, people, listeners of the show will probably know, I really, really, really struggle with country music. I always joke that my worst nightmare is that I have to drive across the country and the only option of music to listen to is country music. Is, as somebody who is a R&B, hip hop, pop fan, how do you think my tolerance could be for an album like Cowboy Carter? Because I've heard that one song that everybody used for every Instagram post ever, which was catchy. And I like Beyonce a lot, but how do you think that would go over for people like me?
I think that she makes a point in the album to talk about how it's not a genre album, it's her music. And I think the people who are saying that it is a country album. I mean, I'm not going to shortchange it that way.
Yeah.
But country sometimes gets pigeonholed into, like, the stereotypical Tennessee, type of music. Not against, like, I'm not saying.
No, that's a hugely popular genre. I mean,
Yeah, but, like,
for a
you need a
reason. People like it.
banjo and like that type of thing. And what country actually is it's decades, if not hundreds of years of gospel mixed with R&B, mixed with blues, mixed with even like alternative or however, whatever the category is now, right?
Yeah.
That's what its a genre is. Like, Tina Turner would have been considered country for a lot of the stuff she did. I mean, Proud Mary back in the day would have been considered a country song.
Yeah.
There was a genre called rockabilly that I wrote about in my book that was a combination of kind of the two, and it was very much based in I don't remember the date, so I'm not going to say it because I don't remember the date. But it was very much based in historic Black music that was being created, especially by African-American women, and played on the guitar and sounded very country, but also sounded very R&B. And you can see that coming through with Cowboy Carter, that she has done the homework on all of those genres and has said, like, country music, yeah, the banjo is great and you can do a lot with a guitar, but here's the other layers that we're missing when we talk about what country is. Wow. And she begins the album with a gospel song. So, or with a sound, not a song, with a gospel sound that is just, it just lays the foundation for, this is not a typical country record. And I also think part of it is like her kind of giving the middle finger to people that said that, like, you can't do country music, you're a pop singer.
Right.
I read that it was inspired. So in 2016, she did the Country Music Awards with the Chicks, who used to be called the Dixie Chicks. And
yes. Yep.
And she was very poorly received by a lot of people in the audience and saying, like, you're not country, why are you here? And she was like, I'm from Texas. Like, it doesn't get much more country than that.
Yeah, really.
So she wrote this album as kind of a response to that experience, and good for her. I mean, anybody saying to someone like her, you don't belong is terrible on many, many layers. Yes. But the professional part of that, of you're not good enough for this. I mean, come on. How many more places does this woman need to prove herself to show that she belongs in a space?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it sounds like she, is directing that, the sound towards people like me. So I think you have convinced me. I'm serious that I should check that out. And yeah, I can't, the rejection that she experienced from people is like, she could sing any genre she wants. She is so, so talented and so passionate about music. And I mean, everything she, touches turns to gold. I mean, come on. Have you seen that Super Bowl halftime performance? Come on.
Well, and it's
a million other things.
She's done the receipt. She's done the work and she has the receipts. I mean, there's artists that really try to do those things. Like, I'm sure people will hate me for saying this, but Justin Timberlake is a good example of someone who tries to blend genres and it's not received as well. And part of that is because he's not always doing the heavy lifting that you need to do. He just assumes he'll fit and not, doesn't know that you kind of got to earn it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be very controversial. I know
that's okay. I am a Justin Timberlake fan, but I'm also not necessarily through like rose-colored glasses either. So, so I hear what you're saying. But yeah, she definitely gives everything 110%. So, I will check that out because I do love Beyonce. That is for sure. So you've written a lot about gender and pop culture. What do you hope people take away from reading your books and research and contributions?
I love this question. I really hope that there's an understanding that whether we like it or not, I said this already, that this stuff impacts us. But also that our view of what is popular is extremely narrow. Like, things are still mainly dominated by men. Awards shows, the Grammys this year, people got all excited because all but one performer were women or non-binary people. And that was a big deal because in the past it had been completely flipped. And it would be nice if we got to a point where that wasn't something that was considered a big deal, right?
Yeah.
That just having a bunch of women performing was just normal.
Right.
Because when we talk about media, when we talk about pop culture, when we talk about the study of all of them, there's still a really heavy lean toward heteronormative white male work.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's not important. It's not that it doesn't have its place.
Right.
But there's all of these other areas that aren't getting the light shined on them that they need to. So Beyonce, the book on Beyonce is going into a second edition that's going to come out, I think, in the spring. Yeah, that one.
Yep. Which I tried to get my background to not do that so that it could be seen, but I'll hold it up.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be in the summer of 25 that the new
Okay.
edition comes out. But when I did that edition, so almost 10 years ago, by the time the next one comes out, there was nothing on Beyonce. And I didn't do that book because I thought, like, I'm just this amazing person who can tell you everything you want to know about Beyonce. I did that book because I was like, it's insane to me that
Yeah.
this woman has had this career and nobody has studied it. And so I pulled together other scholars who had more information than I did and said, let's do a book, because that's bananas, right? Like,
Yeah, how is that possible? Even 10 years, I mean, even 10 years ago, I mean, she's been
yeah.
on the forefront for a long time.
Yeah. And the same, there's a few books happening on like Taylor Swift now, just by the nature of me working on the one I'm working on. But even that, her study of her work has been very, very limited. And some of it's been great, but there's also been a lot of it that is very much influenced in the whole, like, oh, girls singing and playing guitar at 15 is just not that important.
Yeah.
So my hope is that, with everything I do, maybe I can open up that window a little more and bring in more and more diverse voices into conversations about pop culture.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to take a sort of a deeper, not superficial perspective, to dig a little bit deeper, because as much as I'm, because I think I'm of I don't know, of a certain age, whatever, I'm like, oh God, like Taylor Swift, but I see how much she has impacted people like my nieces, and they know everything about her and what she meant behind this song and why she wrote it. It's like, well, you know what? Then that is, I can get behind that. I don't have to, be like
Yeah.
have the get off my lawn, old lady mentality. If she's having a positive impact on them, especially as as young women, having been there at one point myself, I can certainly get behind that. So I will look forward to that, and I will definitely be reading on that as somebody who doesn't know very much about Taylor Swift, but my nieces know when her birthday is, how tall. I mean, it's serious. It's a serious thing.
Swifties are a serious fandom. I mean,
It
they
is.
are. I liken them a lot to the people who are Bruce Springsteen fans, because they take it, I think, just as seriously as Swifties do. The thing that's nice about Swifties, especially the younger folks,
Mhm.
is that this music is kind of teaching them to advocate for themselves. Like,
Yeah.
there's a thread throughout her song that is, I'm going to choose me in all of this. Like,
Yes.
for as much as she writes about relationships, one of the main points of it is, I'm going to do what's best for me here. Even
Yeah.
though this hurts, I'm gonna do what I got to do for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's great for kids to learn.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think they mentioned, oh yeah, this is a version when what's his face owned her music and now she has it back or something, like they're getting that message too, that, that was her property and shouldn't be taken. And, I mean, again, I can get behind that.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I wanted to make sure we touch on before we go into the rapid fire questions, because I don't want to keep you too long here. Is you are also the host of a podcast, which we talked about at the top of the show. Can you tell us a little bit about your show and kind of how that all started?
So Most Popular, I started for my students when it was the year before the pandemic, so it was in 2019,
Hmm.
and I wanted to do a podcast for the students. I recorded 6 episodes and I started assigning them in class, and I thought, I'll just use these as a teaching tool. And I interviewed folks that had more knowledge on topics than I have, which is a lot. I mean, obviously, no one knows everything. So I wanted to pick places where I had knowledge gaps and I knew people who were experts could do that, and then connect it back to pop culture in a way. So like my friend Michael Gillespie is a expert in food inequality, and we talked about how like food trends, like overpriced food trends, like at the time it was the Corona was a big deal.
Yeah.
We used that as an avenue to discuss food inequality for college students, and how most colleges don't have meal plans that support more than 2 meals a day for a student, which you need 3,
Right.
like in general.
Yeah.
Protein bars do not count as a meal.
Right. Lucky Charms. Lucky Charms is not a good breakfast. Is
I
that what you're
mean,
trying?
I would argue that we could say that, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I took those 6 and started assigning them in class, and the students started to tell me this was like the best part of their semester was listening to these podcasts. And then the pandemic happened, and I was like, well, I'm home and I got nothing else but time.
Yeah.
So I recorded, I think, 10 more in like a year. I wasn't being super serious about it. And by the time I did those, the students were like, we want to hear them when we're no longer your student. Like, we want to
Oh,
be able to see them pop up in our feed.
yeah.
And
That's
so
awesome.
I started doing that a little bit. And then I took about a 8-9 month break. I lost an uncle who was like that favorite like person to
Yeah.
me, and grief is real. And so, as you probably understand,
Yeah.
and so
Definitely.
when I got back into it, I got really lucky. I interviewed a guy who I really respect. His name is Bruce Anthony, and his podcast is called Unsolicited Perspectives. And when we were talking after, I said, listen, I did this for a long time and I took a break and I'm trying to get back into it, but grief is real. And he was like, this will help. Like, talking to people about their experiences will help you feel better.
Yeah.
And started doing that. So the podcast combines pop culture with scholars who kind of can explain why we care so much about it. So I've talked to people. I did one with an economist who explained why the Eras Tour was so financially beneficial for the cities it went into, especially last summer. Mayors of American cities were going to Taylor Swift's people and saying, please, please, please come to our city, because she was bringing in just millions of dollars, not
Yeah.
just for the concert, but the tourist dollars that were
Hmm.
coming in. I
Wow.
think it was Philadelphia that said that her coming to Philadelphia for like 4 nights or whatever that she was there basically paid for that city for the rest of the year, like covered people's expenses for,
Wow.
like, that's how much money it brought in tourism dollars.
Holy
And
smokes. Wow.
so, yeah, so I brought in her to explain that and to talk about like why the combination of the Eras Tour, Beyonce's Renaissance Tour, and the film Barbie were such an economic boost to our society that summer.
Mhm.
And those are the conversations I love to have. Like, here's this thing happening in society. Pop culture is connected to it. Let's talk about how those combinations happen.
Yeah.
I talked to a
Love
guy
it.
who I talked to a man who had studied radio for his entire career, and he could explain like why the old timey radio was like a preamble for podcasts.
Hmm.
And we talked about
True.
Hedy Lamarr, who was an actress, old school Hollywood actress, who also kind of invented Wi-Fi.
Whoa.
Like, yeah,
I haven't
yeah,
listened to that one yet. I'll have to check that out.
yeah, I have a friend who is an antenna. He has a PhD in antennas. It's a long title.
What?
And I asked him about it, and he was like, well, technically it's not Wi-Fi, it's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but nobody knows what that is. We all know what Wi-Fi
The
is.
PhD in intense. Wow. I'm still
Yeah.
thinking about that, but continue. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, that's what I like to do. I like talking to people about what's happening in society, because, like I said, pop culture influences us, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And how does that translate to research, to scholarship, to things like our economy, that kind of stuff? How is what's happening right now in society impacting those things, and vice versa?
Yeah. Nice. Well, I love that premise. I think that's so unique and interesting. And like I always say, I really enjoy why I enjoy doing a podcast too, is kind of learning the backstory behind stuff. So it's not just a conversation of, oh yeah, you watched Care Bears. Which one was your favorite? Oh, you like the blue one? I like the yellow one. And like, that's it. Is what, why was this show? Why did kids like this show so much? Or, who started it? And, a lot of times it was like women who worked for greeting card companies that were like,
Yeah.
listen, I've got this idea. What do you think? And, and the woman who wanted, My Little Pony, people are like, nobody's ever gonna,
Yep.
want to have, nobody wants to play with ponies or, and you just kept pursuing it. So I can appreciate that. Yeah. You're taking it to another level, not just saying like, yeah, the Kardashians are really interesting. And can you believe what Kim said on the show the other night is
Right.
digging deeper, which I can appreciate. And I think listeners appreciate too. And how nice that your students were really encouraged you to keep pursuing
Yeah.
it. That's
Yeah, I
amazing.
was a little surprised at that. I was surprised that they give me suggestions. At least twice a semester I ask. I say like, okay, what else do you want to know about?
Yeah.
But now they give me suggestions on what they want to hear more about, and I do try my best to fulfill some of them. Has anyone ever talked with you about the history of She-Ra, Princess of Power versus He-Man in the 80s?
No, but if you yourself or somebody is aware of that, that would be amazing.
Okay. So I don't know anybody. I just know
Okay.
that. So She-Ra was a big deal for me. I'm assuming
Yes.
yes, for you
Same.
too.
Yes. Had the She-Ra
So
sword.
she was developed by a bunch of women at Mattel, and when they created her as He-Man's sister,
Yeah.
they thought she would be like an ancillary character, and these women were like, "No, girls will play with her," and Mattel
Yeah.
was like, "No, they won't. No, they won't."
Yeah.
And so they did I think they did like a test run of her or something, and she just flew off the shelves, and Mattel was just totally shocked that
Wow.
She-Ra would be as big of a deal as He-Man was.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, forget He-Man. We were all about She-Ra. We had
Oh,
the
yes.
pink magenta sword. Yeah,
Yep.
and I know I did an episode about the top 10 Christmas gifts from the 80s, like each year. What was the top gift from 80 to 89, and maybe like 82 or something was He-Man, and they like purposely made him as kind of as muscular as possible so that he was like the biggest um action figure that holiday or whatever,
Yep.
and made him be able to twist at the torso. It's just like what a bizarre message
I know.
that whole thing was. And I made some remark about his outfit. It's like these wrestling boots with like a loincloth. This is not a very masculine. I mean, not,
It's also
anyways,
not
yes.
very practical either. Like, how do you
Right.
fight in that? You know?
Exactly. I mean, just like if you're going to cut yourself sliding down rocks, you have no shirt on. I mean, and those boots, how long is it going to take to untie those? I mean,
Yeah.
geez, you're right. It's
Yeah.
very, very impractical. But if you ever, want to do an episode about that specifically, maybe we could have like a debate of She-Ra versus He-Man or something like that. I think we'd both be on She-Ra's side,
That'd be fun.
but yeah, I haven't looked into that too much, She-Ra specifically, but that's certainly something that would be on the list for sure because we were big She-Ra fans. Nice. And so where can people find your podcast?
Most popular is on all platforms.
Okay.
It's also cataloged on my website, which is just Adrienne Trier-Bieniek.com. And if you're in education, or if you know someone in education, I create supplemental learning guides for each episode. So if you want to have like topics for classroom discussion, if you want to kind of take students through the main points, if you want to have further reading, I make these guides so that folks who want to, and even if you just like want to have it for yourself, that's there too. So if you want to take more away than just the podcast, or if you want to use it in some way, that's available for people on my website.
Nice. Okay. And do you have time for just a few nostalgia rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Okay. I think this is the most important question, so I should get this one right off the bat because it's very contentious. When it comes to notebooks and loose leaf paper, are you team wide ruled or college ruled?
College ruled.
Oh, thank God. Okay. Good. I'm always relieved when people say that. I get very nervous that somebody's going to say wide ruled and I'm going to have to shut down the call. Because I'll be so disrespected. Okay, good. Do you
In a
do
trapper
any?
keeper. College ruled in a trapper keeper. Yep.
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 Oh, definitely. And do you still find yourself jotting down notes and such on a loose leaf or notebook paper? Or you can
Yes, 100%. I own several notebooks. Yep.
Thing. Yep.
Each themed for a different whatever is happening. I take that notebook with me.
Excellent. Yeah, me too. Let's see. What record, tape, or CD did you listen to so much that you wore it out as a teenager or kid?
The first tape I ever bought was Janet Jackson Rhythm Nation.
Oh, good
and
choice.
I paid $8.48 for it. I remember that exactly because I saved every single penny. I knew exactly how much I needed with tax to buy that tape. And I still listen to that thing on my phone. Like that tape was my go-to for many, many moons. I loved it.
Yep. Yeah. I always joke that Janet Jackson is like my Taylor Swift. And I'm going to see her this summer for the first time. I'm so excited. I can't even stand it. Yeah. I cannot wait. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What, this was one I added after, What do you miss most about living in the Midwest? AKA the Midbest is what I like to call it too.
I miss fall.
Mm.
Floridian fall is not the same. I miss seeing the seasons change. I do not miss winter for a second. I'm not
Yeah.
even gonna lie.
Yeah.
Um,
Winter stinks.
but Florida, when it comes to like, I'm a big Halloween person, and when Halloween comes and it's still 90 outside, it's kind of a bummer for me.
Yeah.
Even though, like in Michigan, it would have been like in the 20s on Halloween, and you'd like put your coat over your
Yes.
costume,
Oh my God.
and that was just like the rite of passage for
Yep.
kids.
Oh my God.
But yeah, I miss that. I miss the changing of the seasons.
Yeah. Yeah. As I like to joke and probably again said on the show is you don't have to shovel sunshine.
No,
But
you really don't.
but you can get a concussion when you slip on the ice,
Yes,
which
you can.
yeah.
I do not miss that part at all. I don't miss like having to heat my car up and clean it off.
Yeah. Oh God, that's a dream. All right, we'll do two more. What sitcom from the 80s or 90s could you watch on repeat?
The Golden Girls.
Oh, I think we might be related because that is my probably top 3 shows I own every season.
Oh, hands down. Whenever I'm doing, if the Golden Girls is on, I'll stop and sit for a few minutes and flip through it. There's somebody who, I forget what the Instagram account is, but they've cataloged their favorite scenes and they've put them on Instagram, and I will sit and flip through that all day long. That is great.
I wonder if it's also the same one that they have a YouTube channel too.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. But it was pretty cool. A couple of months ago I had a television writer on the show, and he was actually a writer for Golden Girls on the first season. His name is Stan Zimmerman, really fascinating guy. And he was, I think, in his 20s writing for these older women. So it was pretty hysterical to hear about that, and pretty amazing
That's amazing.
Yeah, that he was able to write these, these scripts that just worked for these seasoned older women. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely. I love that show.
I feel like if like B. Arthur and I are like somehow we are connected on some level, because whenever I see interviews with her, I think to myself, oh, I've thought that or said that, or that's come to my mind before. Yeah.
She was a treasure. I mean, she was kind of intimidating in some ways too, but such a smart, just
cool
really
person.
Smart woman. Yeah. Just ahead of her time for sure. Okay. Let's see. One final question. What was one of your favorite books or book series from your childhood?
Anne of Green Gables, which is kind of a left field answer, but I was obsessed with her.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not familiar, she was an orphan who was taken in by a family in Prince Edward Island, Canada.
Yep.
And I think the setting was like late 1800s. I want to say the books were set in.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was redheaded and feisty and kind of didn't care what anybody thought of her. And she was just going to be herself no matter what.
Yeah.
And she was, talk about a character that was written to not appease men and boys. There was a boy in it that was very into her and did like the whole, oh, he hits you, so he likes you, like that type of relationship. Right. And she wanted nothing to do with that. And it's such a ahead of its time message for girls when Ellen Montgomery wrote those books.
Yeah. Yeah, we grew up really into that. Not so, unfortunately, not so much the books, but because of the CBC / Disney special that we watched a million times and then owned on the dual VHS tapes and watched on repeat and quoted over and over. It's pretty fascinating, and the author has a pretty fascinating backstory too. Pretty actually kind of sad, but I always loved the character of Anne Shirley. That was a fun episode to put together. And someday I'm going to get to Prince Edward Island because it's like not too far. It's maybe 6 to 8 hours or something from where I live. And apparently there's like Anne and Gilbert the musical, which is a whole really thing. Good. Yeah. I would I would really enjoy that because that was a big part of my growing up. So nice to know that there's other Anne Shirley fans. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, in conclusion, you just to review, you kind of mentioned it, but where can people find you on the internet, on social media? And I'll make sure to link all the stuff too. But
I'm on Instagram at Dr. Adrienne TB. T as in Tom, B as in boy. And everything is linked through my website, adrienne-trier-bieniek.com.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Adrienne. It's been a pleasure to talk. I think we are kind of cut from the same cloth. And thank you for thank you for all the fascinating research that you've done, and all the advocacy that you're doing for women. That's just like Taylor Swift and Beyonce and Tori Amos. That is something I can definitely get behind, and I think a lot of listeners can too.
Yeah, thank you. That's very kind. This has been fun.
I hope you have enjoyed this deep dive into the musicianship of the one and only Tori Amos, as well as other talented individuals who have inspired millions, especially women, with their music. Interviewing Adrienne was a pleasure, and I am so glad it worked to have her on the show. I will make sure to link her books and podcast in the show notes. I hope you will join me for my next show, where we will take a look back at yet another fascinating facet of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s in memory of my sister. Until then, be kind, be safe, and hold on to your memories.
Thank you for tuning into my mama's podcast and the memories of Auntie Rebecca.